Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to let everybody get logged in and we'll get started in just a moment. It is straight up 1 p.m. Based on the number of you who have logged on, I believe we're expecting quite a few more, so we're going to give folks just another minute to get logged in.
Terry, do you ask people to put their name in the chat?
Yeah, if you would, as you join, please put your name and agency and state in the chat for us. Again, welcome. We'll get started in just a minute. Put your name, agency, and state in the chat for us. Hi, Emmett.
Sharon, oh my heavens, it's been a million years since I've talked to you. So nice to see your name.
Yeah.
Wow.
Lots of great folks joining us.
Yeah.
All right, we are starting to build some momentum here. Going to wait till the clock says 2 after the hour, and then we will get started and others can join us as they can.
Oh, hi, Naima. Yay. I love seeing everybody with
all the
so
names
many
popping
states.
up is so
I wish
great.
we had a map so that all the states would start popping up with who's who. So
From
great.
your mouth to Zoom's ears. That'll
Right.
Oh, that's true. That could be the next best thing.
Yeah.
Samantha, yeah. Oh, so good.
I haven't seen Naima in a while.
I know.
All right, it is now officially 1:02. Again, I'm sure other folks will join us. If you are just joining us now, please put your name, agency, and state in the chat. My name is Terry Bearden, and I am the project director for organizational capacity building here at the National Community Action Partnership. Welcome to our webinar today, celebrating Community Action Month with a focus on results-oriented culture. As I'm sure you can see, we have our friends from Ansert who are going to be leading the session today. And so I want to mention we are in webinar mode. So you will either need to raise your hand or post a question in the chat in order to be recognized, or in the Q&A. So as always, we like to center ourselves in the promise of community action. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. I will come back at the end of the webinar with a couple of special announcements and to request that you please, please, please complete your evaluation. And with that, I will turn things over to Dr. Mooney and Carrie.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry. All right. So good to be with you all this afternoon. My name is Carrie Gibson. I am the Deputy Director of the Association of Nationally Certified Roma Trainers, Implementers, and Advocates, and joined by the fabulous Dr. Barbara Mooney, who is the Director of Ansert. And we are really thrilled to be with y'all today, just to talk a little bit about celebrating Community Action Month with a focus on results-oriented culture. So, of course, May is Community Action Month. We're coming to the end, but for many of us, every month is really Community Action Month, right? We live this work. It's who we are and what we do and what we celebrate. So kudos to everyone for being a part of celebrating 60 years of community action. And so here's to many, many more. So for our topics today, we really just want to take some time to think about what does it mean to be a culture that is results oriented? If you've heard Denise Harlow say, if you've seen one community action agency before, you've seen one community action agency before, and we know this. So no matter where your agency is located, no matter the size, one thing that is a constant throughout and that will largely determine whether or not we are successful in meeting our mission is our organizational culture. So we're going to talk just briefly about the elements that make up organizational culture. We want to think about how our organizational culture in the network of community action really impacts how we're able to see positive changes for our families, for our community, and also for our agencies as well. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we're calling some of the building blocks of a results-oriented culture. And we hope that after our time together today, y'all will come away with one or two ideas about how you can really be an advocate for a results-oriented culture in your agency. And so really celebrating how we use our data for decision making, how we keep that focus on results, we can answer that question of the so what. What did we do and what actually changed? So when we think about organizational culture, there's lots of different elements that we can consider. Just a couple of things here to center us, if you will. Oftentimes when we think about organizational culture, we're really thinking about this idea of how we within a group maybe interpret or evaluate behaviors, our ideas. It's how we relate to other people that are within or outside of our own group. So we often think about culture as really being a set of traditions that can be passed on through an organized group. And it's those traditions that sort of just become the way of doing things for us. They become our norms. It's how we think, it's how we feel, it's how we view the world. It's really this idea when we think about the culture of an organization, it's how we start to respond to things. It can show up in how we interact with each other, with our customers, with our colleagues, with our stakeholders. So very much important to think about how our culture really impacts everything that we do in our network on a daily basis. So, of course, we see culture reflected in the way that we work. We see culture reflected in the technologies that we choose to use. Think about some of us that maybe embrace the use of social media in our work these days, and some of us that maybe are still kind of coming kicking and screaming to that a little bit. It all depends on the culture of our organization and how we embrace that. Culture impacts, of course, how we respond to our customers. And culture also can really impact how we understand the conditions related to poverty. When we think about things like health and wellness, especially mental health, when we think about people living with different abilities, when we think about education levels, motivation to change, all of these things, culture really can impact how we come and view those specific items. And one thing that we want to talk about the most today is whether our culture in our organization puts us focused on the services, or does it really keep us focused on and celebrating those results? So thinking again about culture in terms of it's our practices, it's what we do, it's sort of this just, oh well, this is just how we act here, this is just our culture of doing things. And so when you think about it, sometimes for people who are outside of our culture, if they were to come in, they may think, well, this is really puzzling, this is really curious, I don't understand why you do things these things this way. Why do you have these certain policies? Why do you have these certain procedures or these certain things that you do? So just a quick little story, and some of y'all may have heard this before, but I think it just does a really nice job of illustrating what we're talking about when we're talking about these decisions, these ideas, these beliefs, these norms that get passed down through generations or across organizations and groups, sometimes without even even saying anything about the why. It's just, oh, well, that's always how we've done it. So if you've heard this story before, you'll hear it again and you'll be thrilled, I'm sure. So this is the idea of, why do we cut the ends off of the ham? And this is a story that originated, I think Zig Ziglar maybe started off with telling this story as an example. And so the wife brings the ham out. It could be the husband that brings the ham out. Somebody's bringing the ham out, right? And the other partner in the house says, "Well, why do you cut the ends off of the ham?" And especially y'all, in this economy, we're thinking we can't waste the ends of that ham. We need to make sure we've got all of this that we can. So the partner says, "Why are you cutting the ends off of the ham?" And so the wife says, "Well, that's just the way my mom did it, so that's how I've always done it." And not accepting that as a response, husband calls mother-in-law and says, "Why did you cut the ends off of the ham before baking it? I just can't figure out why this is happening." And she says to him, "Well, my mama did that. That's just what she always did." So to the phone he goes, he calls grandma, and he says, "What in the world? Why are all of y'all cutting the ends off of this ham?" And she says to him, "Well, I had a small oven, and that's the only way I could get the ham to fit." So she had a reason for cutting off the ends of the ham. It was necessary based on her conditions, based on her environment. But the next two generations didn't have that reason. They just followed because they saw someone that they trusted and believed in doing this. And so then they started doing the same thing as well. So no real rhyme or reason. It just kind of fell into that bucket of, oh, well, this is just the way that it's always been. And sometimes that can be really powerful if we think about those positive attributes of our culture that get passed on. But sometimes we might want to step back and go, is this really the best way? So think about this idea. Again, this pattern of shared basic assumptions that a group has learned to solve problems. And if these patterns have worked well enough to be considered valid, like cutting the ends off the ham, then they get passed down, and that just becomes, well, this is just the normal way that we do it. This is just how it's always worked. So what we don't want to have happen is we don't want for these two folks on our screen to start setting the tone of, oh, well, this is just always what we do. So this person says, well, we didn't really collect any data on how our participants' lives were changed, but we have loads of data about all of the other cool stuff that we've done. So we would say that's probably not a culture that is rooted in being results oriented. So we want to make sure that some new norms, some new customs and traditions are getting passed on in this organization where these two folks are. When you think about how powerful organizational culture can be, you can think about it using this iceberg approach. So you may have seen something like this before, but essentially what we're looking at is the top here. So what's visible to us. This is what we say, oh, this is how we get things done. We set our goals. We use these different kinds of technologies and systems and frameworks. We've got policies and procedures. This is how we really do the work. But what's underneath that surface that we maybe don't see, these are the things that actually really do impact the way that we get things done. So it can be what we believe, what we can assume. And remember, our assumptions might be positive or negative. They might be rooted in fact, or they might not. All of our perceptions, how we interact with our own environment, our attitudes, our feelings, our values, all of those things, those more covert aspects, if you will, those are what really drive our behaviors. Those are really what impacts how we actually get things done. So when we talk about community action being results oriented, I want you to think all the way back, right? We're celebrating our 60 years. So think about, in 1964, we are founded on a results-oriented culture. And we see that approach in using our performance management framework, There are many performance management frameworks out there. We in Community Action have our very own specific anti-poverty focused performance management framework of ROMA, results-oriented management and accountability. And so sometimes we hear though, oh, well, we don't really have time for performance management. We don't have time to do those kinds of things. But that's at the core of what we do, staying centered on what are those outcomes? What are those changes that we want to see happen? How do we make sure that we're using our resources to be able to achieve those results? And then how do we celebrate and talk about those successes? And if you think about who we are and what we do at our core, we are called to mobilize the human and the financial resources of our nation to combat poverty in the United States. We are called upon to be results oriented. Results are a part of our culture in Community Action. And Terry started us off, grounding us in our Community Action promise. But you know what? Let's read it again together. So Community Action changes people's lives. It embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves. We change people's lives. We improve communities. That's our so what. Those are our results. That's what we are in business to do. That's what we want to achieve. That should be the foundation of our organizational culture, that focus on results. Of course, we see it in the vision of the Community Action Partnership, right? They put this material out for us to use and to embrace. Believing, seeing that vision that there are opportunities for all people to strive and to build strong and resilient communities and ensure a more equitable society. Of course, we've got our values here. If you've not gone through some of the material that the partnership has put together to highlight our 60 years in action, take a look at some of the value slides that they've got. But really thinking about these are those values that should drive our culture. These are the values that should show up in the work that we do. Believing that people should be treated with dignity and respect no matter who they are. Believing that the nation has the capacity and the moral obligation to ensure that no one is forced to endure the hardships of poverty, believing everyone has the opportunity to reach their fullest potential, and pledging ourselves to creating that kind of environment. Those are really those pieces of results-oriented culture that we want to make sure we're celebrating. So as you go forth and continue to celebrate this month and really for the rest of the year that we've been around for 60 years, that's 60 years of positive action, please make sure that you are staying focused and celebrating the changes, not just the services, but the changes that we make. The fact that we're able to help individuals and families achieve potential, and that we're able to help communities and resources to communities to have resources and opportunities so that those individual and family changes can not just occur, but they can be maintained as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mooney, and she's going to keep us moving forward.
Okay, thank you so much. Are you going to continue running the slides?
Sure, if that works for
Okay,
you.
that sounds good.
That's our culture of cooperation.
Yes, that's good. Well, you've gotten me all excited again, Carrie, about being results oriented. And one of the things that we want to think about really is, what does that mean? What does it mean to be results oriented? And so one of the things is that you have a focus not just on the services that you provide, but on the results that are achieved. So if you are visiting your family and somebody comes in that you don't know and you're introduced and they say, oh, and what do you do? Do you say, oh, I provide services to people in need? Or do you say, I support individuals who are low income to achieve their potential? So how do you frame your focus? And sometimes things are so integrated into our being that we don't really think about what that means in terms of our culture, the way Carrie taught us just to think about all those things that are underlying. So the results, not just the services. Whoops, yeah. And then accepting that the agency performance is something that is clearly to be identified and improved. You have to be able to understand what your performance is if you're going to be results oriented. And so, how do you do that? Well, one way that you do that is by valuing the idea of a performance management system as a tool. Okay. And so the kinds of system like Roma is the performance management system that we use in community action. But there are lots of performance management systems out there in the world that do virtually the same kind of thing that we do with Roma. They talk about assessing the need and then making a plan and implementing the plan, and then having our results, collecting our data, and then analyzing the data. But it's more about not just that system that goes into the culture, but the idea of being results oriented is integrated into absolutely every facet of agency functioning, or it should be, and that's how you demonstrate a results oriented culture. So you may have seen this before, but here are some building blocks that go into a result oriented culture. And the first one is that recognition of a results orientation. You have to first be able to say, um, this is important to us to be able to talk about our results, to be able to talk about our performance. And then there's a broad exposure to staff across your agency in the basic principles and practices related to a results orientation. And sometimes there's a Roma person at an agency. We often hear that. Or you have a reports person or a data collection person. But the real culture of a results orientation means that all the staff have something to do with performance management, and that they understand and acknowledge that. And that the leadership, the executive staff and the board really support this, and are it's important to the executive staff and the board that there be performance management activities throughout the agency, and that there are staff that's competent and trained, and they know they understand the results orientation, and they can help each other. This number 5 is an important one too. That there's a shared language in the agency. I know I worked at an agency in my local area when I was younger, and there was a large Head Start component, and then the rest of the agency was about the same size as Head Start. And that the rest of the agency had lots of different kinds of funds. And in the early days, you would go around and you would talk to people, and this group is talking about objectives, and this group is talking about goals, and people weren't talking the same language. And I think that that is a barrier to this concept of an organizational culture that is results oriented. So you have to have a language that everybody understands, and that all of that gets put into an overall theory of change, that you know what your agency is about in terms of what could be, what will change for the agency. And then there's this deliberate incorporation of the results thinking into all activities, all regular routine activities. It's not an extra thing, it's not an add-on, but it's really about the routine management of your agency. So how do we get there? Well, we have to have leadership. It's really the leaders that help to stimulate the culture and change the behavior to produce the results that we want to talk about. So when we talk about leadership and leaders, sometimes we think, well, who are the leaders, and what's the impact of leadership? And so it's really the basis of what allows the organization to achieve the results that they're looking for, or to not achieve the results. There's a lot of focus on the leadership of a culture. And who are the leaders? So sometimes we hear, I'm not part of the management team, and so um, I'm not a leader. And so leadership activities, professional development, not for me. And I have no influence over the agency's results orientation. We hear this a lot from newly minted Roma implementers that, oh, I really can't put anything to use because I'm not in a formal management position. And what do we say to that? We say, nah, that's not true. We say that leadership starts with people where they are. And so we thought we'd just take a couple minutes to talk about leadership here today and how it fits into the development of your organizational culture. So when we talk about leadership, we're talking about a process whereby an individual influences other individuals. So one person influences a group of other people. And the purpose of that influence is to achieve a common goal. So when we look at it that way, when we think about leadership as a process, not just a trait or a characteristic, like we say, oh, leaders are charismatic, and oh, that person is a leader because they were a born leader, and so on. But what we think is that if you think of it as a process, that it's a transaction between the leader and others in the group, then those are skills that can be learned and can be developed. And so that gives us this concept of a leader, the process of a leadership being affected by training, by experience, but also by that interaction with the other people in the group. So the leader listens to what the group has to say, and then responds to that. It's not just a one-way discussion, but it's really an interaction, and that process of interaction is what we define as leadership. And it's available in this way to absolutely everybody, not just one person that's designated as a leader. So we have this term that we use for some leadership, and we call it change champions. So who are the change champions? We say for our purposes, and when you're looking at cultural uh, organizational culture and a change or a support of a results orientation, that who in the organization is a change champion. It could be the person who identifies that there's a need for a change and has a passion for it. So somebody that says, oh, look, this is something that we're doing that could be improved. Let's make this change. I feel passionate about that. It could be that person. Or it could be somebody that just is willing to use their own knowledge and skills to help plan a change that somebody else has identified. Somebody's identified a change, and you say, oh, I think that would be useful. And here I'll help you think about what kinds of action steps it would take to make that change happen. And then you could be the person who's just monitoring the process towards change and saying, wait a minute, we got started on this change project in January, and here it is May, the end of May. Where are we with those action steps? So somebody has to be that person, and that's a leadership position to be able to say, what's the progress that we've gone, that we should have, and are we making that progress? And then it's always important to make sure that the executive leadership in the organization, the actual designated CEO, executive director, big kahuna, the chief operating officer, that that somebody at that level who wanted to see a change happen, somebody from the change process needs to provide input to that executive as a way to help ensure that the change is going to move forward. Oh, and so how could you support your results oriented culture at your agency? So there are just a couple ideas. We thought we thought we'd start with this idea of assessing the culture that you have. We've been talking about organizational culture for a lot of years because as we moved to Roman next generation, we started to think about the importance of data and evidence-based decision making, that maybe the culture in the Community Action Network was more about uh, hands-on providing services than in actually looking at that kind of data. So we set out, well, first, let's assess the culture, both individually and the agency itself, and then identify what change culture would look like. So what would be the change? What would it look like after a change happened? And then create a plan for change that includes development of activities and who identifies who would be involved, and then implement the change, reassess and analyze and plan. And I said, oh, well, what does that look like? So if you click again, Carrie, you'll see the little Roma cycle comes up. And that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about using the Roma cycle in a specific way to help assess and change the organizational culture, and then to analyze to see, is the organizational culture actually changing? I have a couple of, I've asked Terry to put these in the chat. There's two documents that one is about a staff person surveying what they believe about different parts of a results orientation. So this first one is like uh, the example I gave it when I started to talk, that when asked about my job, I primarily talk about what services I do, or when asked about my job, I primarily talk about what changed and what was accomplished by the families and communities I serve. So there are two surveys, one that you use to really think about your own orientation. And then the second one is what you think the agency thinks about the about a result orientation. What do they say they believe? And then what do they actually do in practice? So just an idea, a couple of tools that you can use that I see are now posted in the chat. So be sure you download them and take a look at them, and think about your own culture at your agency, and think about just how results oriented is it. And then if you think that you might not be so results oriented, think about what are some elements of that new culture? What might that new culture look like? And so one of the things that is a hallmark of a results oriented organizational culture is this idea of feedback and communication, this mechanization for engaging in discussion and offering opportunities for feedback. And it's about the whole organization thinking about continuous learning, that your organization encourages you to do things like join a webinar on a Wednesday afternoon and take time away from your job duties to think about things in a different way. That's part of continuous learning. And are the employees engaged in decision making, in activities that benefit the whole agency? Is there inclusion? Is there appreciation of a diverse workforce? Is that something that's important to your agency? This is what your culture would look like if it was results oriented. And then the idea that you've got this accountability for results. That's an important factor, that you're accountable and that you want to be accountable for results. It's not just, oh, we deliver this service and we have no idea what happens to people as a result of it. So just the thought of accountability is important. And then this last one is one that I challenge you to think about more completely, that that we're looking at the idea of rewarding employees' activities. Sometimes we think that we're results oriented, and then when we see the kinds of rewards that are provided to employees, it's not about their results. It's not about their decision making using data. And so then is there, if there's not that support at that level for employee performance, then we have to wonder, well, what could change that could improve the results orientation of the culture that would focus more on rewarding employees for results thinking. Okay, so I think we're going to start to look. Oh, here's one more. Oh, and it's about data, being data centric. So the idea of making decisions, both those in immediate day-to-day decisions and the long-term decisions based on the facts that are reliable and accessible, um, can help you understand the results orientation. So it's about being data centric. And so can you apply different data sources to create actionable insights that would support advocacy, would support your marketing of your agency, would support engaging stakeholders, and that could support that broader focus of the organization. The data sources can do that. And then are the decisions being supported by verifiable data? Sometimes we hear folks say, oh, we have a big need for affordable housing in our community, and you start to talk about, well, what's affordable in your community, and they don't have any data. Oh, it's, I don't know how much it is, but you want to be sure that you have the data that supports you if you're going to be thinking about talking to other people, being advocates for the individuals in your community that are low income. Now I think we're moving on to creating a plan. And we framed this section about making a plan around some of the community action ethical standards. So I'm going to turn over to Carrie, who's our new CCAP, newly minted CCAP, who can be talking to us about some community action ethical standards.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so yeah, looking at our ethics and how can we think too about those ethics, our ethical standards and community action, how might we even think about those as building blocks of a results-oriented culture as well? So the first one that we want to just briefly talk about is to remain focused on mission. And if you are familiar with your code of ethics, you might recognize this one. And this is, we talk so much about our mission in the work that we do. It's the first opportunity to people get that look at us to see, who are we? What are we going to do? And most importantly, what is it that we say we are going to be able to change? And so remembering that the chief function of the community action movement at all times, this is directly from your code of ethics, at all times, is to serve the best interest of the people living with lower income, which in turn serves the best interest of the entire community. We seek to empower and revitalize. Those are actions, those are results to empower and revitalize communities, to engage in activities. Those are those services that move us closer to mission achievement and further our positive outcomes. So right there, very clear in black and white, we are to remain focused on our mission, which is to move us to those positive outcomes or those positive results. So we want to make sure that that is embraced across our network. Barbara, do you want to look at this next one? Oh, you're muted, Barbara.
Sorry. This one is about being an advocate and an educator. So we don't want to call ourselves lobbyists, but because we want to think about educating the public. And part of that is dismantling myths. There are so many misconceptions out there about what life is like for individuals that have low income, and about families that live in communities where the majority of their peers, their neighbors, have low income. The concept of economic mobility and economic equity are difficult for some people to understand. And part of our role is to be able to help people think about, what would it be like if you had to live on X number of dollars a month. It's not, oh, it's the life of Riley, it's so easy, people are not motivated. But what are the problems that cause people to not take those low paying jobs that would cause them to be worse off than they are now? So the idea of being an advocate to dismantle myths is an important part of being in a results oriented culture.
And to dispel that myth that we as agencies, we only put band-aids on things, right? We only provide services. We're just about, oh, get the money out the door. But yes, we do those things, but we do it so that we can have those changes. And we need to help people understand that that's what community action is all about. It's all about the change. And we need to inspire confidence and trust in everything that we do. So again, looking at the language supporting this particular standard, we're leading and serving with professional competence. We want to be up to date on emerging issues in our field. So we want to make sure that we're leaning into those frameworks. We're leaning into our system of performance management. We're embracing always thinking about how to be better, how to do this good work. We're upholding our standards of personal integrity. We're adhering to those ethics of making sure that we respect confidentiality. We treat each others with respect. We are honest in all that we say, in all that we do. And then we're confronting those behaviors or practices that could erode the trust in community action, or that could disregard the struggle of people living with low incomes. And so when we hear people say, oh, it's just about the service, or it's just about the counts of things, no, that's not how we instill confidence and trust with what we do. We instill that confidence and trust by saying, look, here's the data, here's the real proof, if you will, that what we've done actually works, and what we've done has actually led to change. So part of that results orientation is making sure that we're confronting anytime people say, oh, what you do just doesn't work, that we can come back with the data and say, but it does. And we're inspiring with that confidence and trust. Barbara?
And if we don't have the right data to make those kinds of statements, then we might not be perceived as being reliable or trustworthy. So when we're thinking about what data do we need to collect to report, and what data do we need to collect to tell our story, those might be very different kinds of data elements. This one is more about how you see yourself in the context of your agency. So if we had a workforce that practiced this principle of service above self, where there's no real or perceived conflict of interest, where there's no particular gain that the staff has, but that it's really about doing the job for others, that would be a good foundation for a results-oriented culture.
And Barbara talked a little bit about this one earlier, of course, but being leaders, supporting leaders, and creating leaders. So thinking about, all of our work in terms of supporting maximum feasible participation. When we think about our board structure, we want to make sure that we are actively engaging people that live with low incomes in realizing and developing their own leadership skills, that we are supporting leaders, we're respecting leaders, we're providing facts, we're providing these nuggets of information as the basis for policy decisions, and that we are practicing open-mindedness. We're effectively communicating with each other. We're embracing this idea of taking care of ourselves and each other, and we encourage and embrace the professional and the personal development of everyone across the Community Action Network. So that idea of leadership is not about a title. It's not about the letters that come at the end of your name. Leadership is something that is inherent in all of us, and how we look at that leadership as a process, right? Not just as those traits, but that process, that interactive process. That's how we continue to do all of those other things, to be focused on our mission, to be advocates, to be outspoken educators, and to lead with that focus on results, to be that results-oriented leader, no matter who you are, no matter what hat you wear in your organization.
I love this one because it's really about going beyond the checkbox, beyond compliance, that we're engaging in services and interactions with the low-income community that we serve, for the purpose of achieving a change in their lives, helping them become more stable, helping them have mobility, having a better economic status. And that it's not, to get there, it's not good enough for us to just fill in some boxes and let somebody else tell us, oh, this is all you need to think about. This is all you need to do. We really have to exercise our own influence that would help to inspire, to help create best practices that we could share, that we think about what works and what doesn't work. We think about how we deal with trauma-informed customers, and that we're always looking for innovation. The Community Action Network is always looking for innovation, and yet we're perceived to be old hat and not innovative. We need to change that perception of us, that we are innovative, and that we're willing to evaluate the outcomes of our work, because it's only in identifying what doesn't work and separating what works and what doesn't work that we're going to achieve excellence, that we're going to know success. What is it? If you don't recognize success, you're probably rewarding failure. So the idea that you're striving for performance excellence in everything that you do.
I just got chills, Barbara. Yes, that's exactly right. How do you know if what you're doing works if you don't evaluate it? And we owe it to our customers, to our communities. We are in these roles. We owe it to the people that we serve to make sure that we are doing the very best to make sure that those results can be achieved. So we want you to just go away from your time this afternoon when you think about how can you contribute towards a results-oriented culture. Lead from where you are. You are only you. There is no other you in your organization, in this world, in this network, and what you have to offer, no matter what hat you wear, no matter what role you play, no matter your title, your letters, any of that. You are a leader. You can inspire your agency to adopt, to maintain that results orientation. So lead from where you are.
And share what you know. Don't be afraid to speak up and say, oh, maybe we could do it a little bit differently and have some different results. So that idea of you're not off the hook because you're not the executive director of the agency. You can't say, I can't make any change because I'm not the boss. Lead from where you are and share what you know with your peers. It's important to understand you have knowledge, you have experience, you have lived experience, you've been successful. And if you're honest about when you've been successful and when you've not been successful, and you can identify the difference and you can help your peers think that way, that that we'll be able to move forward. We'll be able to have more successes as we go into the next 60 years of community action. Well, so we always challenge. This is always our last slide in every presentation that we do. So what's one thing that you could take away from today's discussion or presentation of materials that could help you move to something better? And in this case, to a more results-oriented culture, to really thinking about what changes, not just how many people are enrolled or how many people receive services, but what changed for those people, what was important. Oh, and someone says, I'm going to present this material to my team. Yay, that's a good first step to take after today's showing. Thank you. Okay. And Terry, I think you've got a final thought, and then we are open for questions or comments from the group.
Yes, so I think the next slide actually has your contact information, so everyone will be able to reach out to you. I have mentioned in the chat that the slides and the recording and the documents that Barbara asked me to share will all be posted at the resource library at the NCAP website. So I also think it's a great idea. You can share the recording with your team, the slide deck, whatever works for you. That's why we actually host these webinars, to provide you guys with resources and information. So I want to encourage you all. On the next slide, we have a link as well as a QR code. So if you want to snap a picture of the QR code so that you can complete a very quick evaluation, knowing me as a Roma person, and Carrie and Barbara, of course, are Roma people. We hang our hats on evaluations. You should see a link pop up as soon as the webinar ends, so you can either utilize the QR code or the link that you'll see when the webinar ends. I'm trying to stop for a second and see.
There's a couple of things in the chat that
Yes.
I'd like to bring up, if that's okay.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah. So Michelle is starting the Roma training in June. That's always a good foundation. Thank you. I recognized your name and said, oh, yes, I know about that training. So that's great. The introduction to Roma training is comprehensive and might not be for everybody, but it is the foundation of all of the kinds of performance management systems that you're ever going to see in the world. So it's good to know that we're still doing that. And then other Michelle is going to look at program data and think about publishing that data in a newsletter. That's really great that you're going to use your own data, create a story from it, and then tell people. That's what baseball did, right? In the baseball cards, they gathered their data, they collected data, they analyzed it, and then they published it. So those are really good steps. And then Samantha's going to speak up. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You didn't feel like you had clout, but now you do. So if that's the only results that we got of the webinar today, we're happy with that. To be able to have people speak up and say it's important that we look at our results, not just our services. And oh yeah, we're looking at intro and implementers too. So that's all. It's good. It's about that developing staff capacity, developing agency capacity. That's one of those steps forward in creating a results orientation. I think those are all the ones I saw, Jerry.
I would like, oh, here comes Sarah. Sarah also.
An anytime employee feedback method. Okay, so there's periodic feedback, and it's like a big deal when it happens. And now we'd like to have it be anytime, and it just be something that's done routinely. What a great idea, Sarah. And that's really what that one slide was about. We talked about continuous feedback, encouraging feedback. The feedback from employees is seen to be like some big special thing. sometimes people are afraid to give any feedback. And so if it's routine, if it's a part of what you do, if it's integrated into everything else in the agency, then it's much more accessible.
And
Right.
Naima, yep, in Louisiana, that state office, y'all are on fire with setting that message from the top, right? Saying, hey, we believe in this. This is important to us, empowering employees.
And
absolutely.
the rewards,
Yep.
the idea of
Yep.
rewards. And
Yep.
you know, when we talk about rewards, it doesn't have to be something big. I mean, sometimes just an attaboy, sometimes just a, wow, that was really, thank you for submitting your data on time, or your data was very interesting to us. You know, sometimes just the knowledge that you listened or watched or saw their data, sometimes that's a reward in itself.
Great. And
Oh,
Rachel's going to
clients can
take
also
that.
do feedback. Yes, good,
Yep.
good.
Yep. So Rachel's going to take that idea from Sarah as well. Excellent.
Yes,
Lots of little culture changes. Yeah.
sometimes we've thought a lot about client feedback, but we haven't thought about staff feedback in the same way. So that's important.
Yeah.
That's important. Good.
All right. I have a couple of commercials I'd like to do. You guys know.
Okay,
Oh, wait,
sure.
Cheryl,
Go ahead.
let's get Cheryl's comment first. We include all employees 99 and board members in strategic planning. First steps planning next month. All right. Great,
Wow.
Cheryl. Thank you.
And as you're doing that, Cheryl, think about outcomes first in your planning.
Yep.
Think about what are our outcomes going to be, and then what services will we provide. So that's
How will we get there?
Absolutely. Yay.
Yep. Great.
All right, so we have had a great time based on your comments and some text messages actually that I've been receiving with Barbara and Carrie today, recognizing the importance of a results-oriented culture as our network celebrates its 60th anniversary. So we also want to encourage you to join us in Seattle for the 60th celebration that we're going to host. It's going to be a heck of a shindig, so y'all come on and register. I believe early registration ends Friday.
I think it's
tomorrow.
Oh yeah, tomorrow or Friday. Yeah.
So be sure to go to the NCAP website, communityactionpartnership.com, and check that out. Also, we have a couple of events that I wanted to mention to you. We have an executive director and board chair symposium, June 26th and 27th in St. Paul, Minnesota. This is a great opportunity to really enhance that very important relationship between the executive director and board chair. Registration closes for that in 2 weeks, so please register early and often. And last but not least, coming attractions. We're going to be hosting 2 new Executive Director Institutes this year, one October 29th and 30th in Alexandria, Virginia, and the other December 3rd and 4th in San Diego, California. Registration will be opening soon for that. And the best way I can encourage you to stay abreast of all of these types of happenings is to make sure you go to the NCAP website and hit the subscribe button at the top and get our weekly e-news and periodic special announcements so you know when these events are coming and you can engage more fully with NCAP and with the network. And with that, I believe we have reached the end of our time together. We have a couple more minutes if anybody wanted to add something to the chat or Q&A. And if
thank you all for the input that you did provide in the chat. That was enlightening for us. So that's great.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, please complete your evaluations. And we appreciate you joining us, and we will see you soon.
Happy anniversary, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. And thank you so much for all the work that you do every single day, no matter the month.
Thank you all.